The email arrived on a Wednesday morning, its subject line simple yet strange. Inheritance notification, Rose Bennett estate. Emily stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Her grandmother, Rose, had died 6 months ago, and she hadn't even attended the funeral. The two hadn't spoken in years, ever since the quiet summer when Emily was 11, and everything between them had silently ruptured. Inside the email, legal phrasing spun around the truth. The old cottage in Vermont, Rose's home for the last 40 years, now belonged to Emily. No strings attached, just keys, an address, and an offer from the local law office to meet if she had questions. Emily blinked at the screen, unsure how to process the inheritance of a house from someone who had been more myth than relative. She packed 2 bags, grabbed her sketchbook, and left Boston behind. The drive to Vermont wound through dense pine forests and sleepy towns, each more forgotten than the last. By the time she pulled up the narrow gravel driveway, the sky had turned pewter grey and the air smelled of damp leaves and pine resin. The cottage stood at the top of a small hill, its weathered facade covered in ivy, the windows staring blankly like tired eyes. Emily stepped out of the car, her boots crunching on gravel. The front door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, everything was covered in dust and silence. A faded armchair near the fireplace, stacks of old books, a vase with dead, crumbling flowers. Her fingers traced the outline of a photo on the mantel, Rose, decades younger, holding a baby Emily in her arms. That moment looked like someone else's life. The house smelled of cedar and memories she didn't want to remember. She explored the first floor slowly. The kitchen still had dishes in the sink, as if Rose had meant to return. Upstairs, bedrooms held untouched sheets and neatly folded quilts. But what caught her attention was the narrow hallway at the back of the second floor. At the end, a wooden door stood out from the rest. Not just because it was older, heavier, but because it was locked. She jiggled the doorknob. Nothing. No keyhole, no rusted padlock, just sealed. A strange feeling stirred in her gut. She placed her palm flat against the wood. It was cold, even colder than the surrounding air. Her heart beat a little faster. Why was this door locked when everything else in the house had been left wide open? As the first drops of rain tapped against the roof, Emily stood frozen in front of that door, a question blooming in her mind that wouldn't be silenced. What had Rose hidden in there? Before she could think of a reason to turn back, her phone buzzed with a weak signal, a single bar. She glanced at it, then back at the locked door. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" But before we even think of unlocking what lies behind that door, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because what Emily is about to discover will change her life forever, and you won't want to miss a single twist in this haunting mystery. Back downstairs, she found the envelope left on the kitchen table by the lawyer. Inside, the house deed, a handwritten note from Rose that said only "forgive me," and a single brass key. But it wasn't for that door. The storm picked up as night fell, shadows bending strangely around the corners of the cottage. Emily lit an old oil lamp she found in the pantry, the flickering light revealing wallpaper patterns she'd forgotten even existed. She sat in the armchair, pulling her sweater close around her, staring at the ceiling above, right where that locked door waited. She wasn't sure she'd sleep tonight, and maybe part of her didn't want to. Emily woke to silence. Morning light slipped through the curtains in pale streaks, illuminating the layers of dust dancing in the air. The cottage was colder than she remembered. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and made tea with the last of the old packets in the cupboard. The familiarity of the place was disorienting. It felt like stepping into a version of her childhood she didn't trust anymore. She wandered through the rooms again, slower this time. There were details she hadn't noticed the night before. The way the floor creaked in a pattern near the staircase, a faint scent of lavender lingering in the hallway, a chipped porcelain doll sitting upright on a shelf with glassy eyes that followed her. She paused in the hallway upstairs, drawn once more to the locked door. It stood unchanged, silent and stern. Emily ran her fingers along its frame, pressing gently at its edges. Nothing gave. The wood was solid, and no visible keyhole offered a solution. Something about the door unsettled her, not just that it was locked, but that it had always been locked. Even when she was little, it had been off limits. She didn't remember much from those visits to Rose's cottage. Only fragments: rain on the roof, the taste of cinnamon cookies, Rose's perfume, something floral but heavy, and silence, always the silence between them. Her mother rarely brought her here, and when she did, Rose barely spoke, barely touched her. There was always a tension in the air, like a conversation everyone refused to have. In the study, Emily discovered a shelf of notebooks, dozens of them. Most were blank, but a few held lists, half-finished poems, newspaper clippings. One had a pressed rose inside and a date written beneath, August 3rd, 1998. That summer. Her last visit. She ran her thumb over the petals, dry and brittle, and for a moment she could smell the sun-warmed garden, hear Rose humming faintly outside the kitchen window. Back in the kitchen, she opened the old bread box and found something unexpected: a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. Most were addressed to Rose, dated across decades. The handwriting varied, some sharp and impatient, others soft and looping. She picked one at random and read only a few lines before stopping. It mentioned her mother, not in passing, in detail. Her mother's name, Rebecca, written over and over. References to sleepless nights, fears, mistakes that couldn't be undone. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she put the letter down. None of this had ever been shared. Her mother had spoken so little about Rose, only that their relationship had been strained. But this was another layer. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the bundle. These weren't love letters. They were something else. Confessions, maybe. Pleas, warnings. In the back of the drawer, beneath the sink, she found a small tin box filled with old photographs. Most were black and white. Rose as a young woman, smiling beside a man Emily didn't recognize. Another of her mother at 16, unsmiling, hair tied in a tight braid. Then one that made Emily catch her breath. A picture of herself at maybe 5, sitting on the porch of the cottage, clutching a stuffed bear she didn't remember owning. Rose stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, eyes looking somewhere past the camera. Who took that photo? She turned it over. No date, no note. Just the image, frozen in time. The rest of the day slipped by as she sifted through more forgotten drawers and cabinets, each revealing fragments of a life she never truly knew. The house was like a puzzle made of memories, and she wasn't sure yet if she was trying to solve it or survive it. That night, as she climbed the stairs to bed, she paused once more at the locked door. Behind it, something waited. Not just objects, not just dust. Something that knew her name. The next morning, Emily drove into the nearby town of Belhaven. It was little more than a general store, a diner, and a gas station. She needed supplies, groceries, batteries, a stronger flashlight, and maybe some information. The town felt like it had been dipped in amber, unchanged in decades. Everyone she passed gave her a polite nod, but there was hesitation in their eyes. Recognition, maybe, or something close to it. Inside the general store, she picked up a basket and made her way down the aisles. An older woman behind the counter watched her closely. Her name tag read, Clara. "You're Rose's granddaughter," Clara said, not a question. Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." "Emily Bennett." Clara's face didn't change, but something in her voice tightened. "Didn't know she had much family left." "Just me now," Emily said softly. "She left me the cottage." Clara looked away for a moment, then began bagging items that hadn't yet been rung up. "You staying there long?" "I'm not sure, maybe. There's a lot I don't understand about that place." Clara's hands stilled. "Best not to dig too deep, honey. That house holds things better left alone." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Did you know her well?" "Well enough to mind my own business," Clara replied. "Some folks forget how to do that." The conversation ended there. Emily paid and left, her curiosity now fully awake. She placed the bags in her trunk and was about to drive off when a man knocked lightly on her passenger window. He was tall, with dark hair streaked with grey and a calm, weathered face. She rolled the window down. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "Name's Daniel Reed. I was Rose's handyman for a time, helped her keep the place from falling apart. Emily studied him for a moment. His eyes were kind but cautious. "Emily Bennett," she said. "Thanks for your help with the house, I guess. I heard you were in town. Thought I'd say hello. If you need anything, plumbing, locks, storm windows, I'm around." She hesitated. "Actually, there's a door upstairs. It's locked. No key, no explanation. Do you know anything about it?" Daniel's jaw tightened just slightly. "That door?" "Yes." He looked off toward the woods for a long moment. "It's best not to worry about it. Some things Rose meant to keep closed." Emily frowned. "That's not much of an answer." "I'm not trying to be vague," Daniel said. "Just honest. That room's been sealed as long as I've known the house. Rose never spoke of it, and I never asked." She narrowed her eyes. "People keep telling me not to dig, but they don't tell me why." Daniel gave her a sad smile. "Because we're used to things staying buried out here. Keeps the world simpler. I'm not here to be simple." "I figured as much." She watched him walk away, his boots crunching on the gravel. His warning, like Clara's, was gentle but firm, not a threat, a memory wrapped in caution. That night, back at the cottage, Emily unpacked her groceries and moved through the kitchen with mechanical motions. Her mind replayed the conversations from town. Everyone knew something. Everyone avoided it. After dinner, the rain began again, soft at first, then harder, rattling the windows. Emily climbed the stairs, flashlight in hand. The beam passed over the hallway, stopping on the locked door. She leaned in, ear to the wood. Silence. Then, faintly, a sound, not footsteps, not wind, a soft scrape, a dragging, like something brushing against the floor inside. Emily backed away, heart pounding. The door remained still, but whatever was inside had just reminded her. It was still there, and it wasn't sleeping. Sleep came in fragments. Every time Emily drifted off, something dragged her back. The wind brushing against the windows, a creak from the attic above, the echo of that soft scrape behind the locked door. Morning light finally broke through, grey and cold. She got dressed slowly, her mind still trapped in the hallway upstairs. Determined to distract herself, she returned to the study. The stack of letters from the kitchen table still waited, untouched since she'd gathered them the night before. She set them aside and opened one of the lower drawers in Rose's old writing desk. It stuck slightly, then gave with a groan. Inside, hidden beneath a pile of yellowed receipts, she found a leather-bound journal. The initials on the front, RMB, made her breath catch. Rebecca Marie Bennett, her mother. She hadn't known a diary existed. Carefully, she opened the first page. The handwriting was delicate but tense, like someone writing quickly and trying not to feel too much. The entries were short, scattered across years. Most of them were dated from Emily's early childhood, the final entries growing darker, more fragmented. March 12, 1996. Samuel had another episode. Mother won't talk about it. Says we must protect the family name. But how? Emily is still so young. She doesn't understand. Emily's eyes lingered on the name. Samuel? She turned the page. June 8, 1997. Emily asked about the door. I told her it's just a storage room, but she cried that night. I think she remembers more than she lets on. Rose says she's imagining things. I'm not so sure. She flipped through more entries, pulse quickening. The diary stopped abruptly in August 1998, the summer of their last visit. The final line read, I left her there. God forgive me. Emily closed the book, heart racing. There was something behind that door. Something to do with her mother, and someone named Samuel. She went to the living room and stood in front of the fireplace, trying to breathe. The photograph of Rose and baby Emily still rested on the mantel, but now it looked different, like a prop placed to comfort, to distract. She stared at it until her eyes blurred. Later that afternoon, while sweeping the upstairs hallway, Emily noticed a seam in the floorboards near the wall. It was subtle, a narrow square the size of a shoebox. She knelt, ran her fingers over it, then used a butter knife to pry it open. Inside was a small rusted tin, wrapped in a strip of cloth. She pulled it out, placed it on the floor, and opened it slowly. A brass key. Old, ornate, with delicate etchings around the handle. Her breath caught. She stood up, gripping the key tightly, and turned toward the locked door. The hallway seemed quieter than usual, like even the air was listening. She approached slowly, heart thudding with each step. The key trembled slightly in her hand. She fit it into the handle, it slid in, but when she turned it, nothing happened. The door stayed locked. She tried again. Same result. The key fit perfectly but didn't unlock anything. Frustrated, she pulled it out and examined it. It wasn't broken. It simply wasn't for this door. Disappointment wrapped around her like cold mist. She'd thought she was close, thought this would be the moment everything shifted. But the door had denied her again. Still, the diary had opened something else. A shadow she hadn't known was there now had a name, Samuel, a brother, a cousin. Someone kept in silence. She didn't have answers, but she had a question that burned brighter than before. Who was Samuel, and why had her mother written of him in fear? The next morning brought a fragile sun, casting long shadows through the trees. Emily stood on the porch, staring out at the woods, the diary clutched in her hand. Her thoughts spun around the name she couldn't shake. Samuel. It echoed through the halls of the cottage, whispered in the corners of every memory. She had no recollection of a Samuel, and yet something about it made her skin prickle. Back inside, she decided to explore the attic. The staircase groaned beneath her feet as she ascended, dust swirling around each step. At the top, a small door opened into a cramped, cobwebbed space filled with boxes. Most were labeled in Rose's spidery handwriting. Tax papers, 1981. Old linens, photo albums. She moved one of the larger boxes aside and spotted something different. A small wooden crate with no label. Inside she found children's toys. A wooden train, a frayed stuffed rabbit, puzzle pieces in a rusted tin. And at the bottom, a cracked photo frame containing an image of Rose holding a young boy. Not Emily. The boy was maybe 6 or 7, blonde with a solemn expression and eyes identical to hers. On the back, written faintly in pencil, Samuel, summer 1993. Emily's hands began to tremble. The attic seemed to tilt around her. She sat down, heart thudding, unable to tear her eyes from the photo. Samuel had been real. Her family had hidden him from her, from everyone. But why? She spent the rest of the afternoon searching for more. In a trunk beneath an old quilt, she uncovered drawings, childlike, scribbled in thick crayons. One showed 2 children holding hands beneath a tree. The other, a small room with no windows and a figure standing in the corner scribbled in black. Another key was taped to the inside of the trunk lid, different from the ornate brass one she'd found earlier. Simpler, modern. Her breath caught. She ran to the second floor, heart pounding with every step. The hallway narrowed around her as she approached the locked door. She inserted the key. This time it turned. There was a soft click, a slow, reluctant release. The door opened. The room was perfectly preserved, untouched by time. A thin layer of dust coated everything, but nothing had been disturbed. A child's bed with blue sheets, a faded rug with cartoon animals, a bookshelf filled with worn picture books, a wooden chair in the corner. Emily stepped inside, barely breathing. The air was heavy, unmoved, not stale, reverent. She turned slowly, taking in the details. Crayon marks on the wall. A tiny handprint near the window. Her chest tightened. There was a stack of notebooks on the small desk. She picked one up and flipped through it. Page after page of chaotic scribbles, dark spirals, crossed-out words, and a single phrase repeated again and again. Don't tell. Don't tell, don't tell. Her stomach clenched. Then she saw the photograph pinned to the corkboard above the desk. Rose again. Her mother, younger, sitting beside her, and between them, Samuel. She leaned closer. Her own face stared back from the edge of the frame, maybe 4 years old. She was holding the same stuffed bear from the photo she'd found earlier, but now it was clear. She'd been there with Samuel. She hadn't just known him. She'd forgotten him. The room blurred around her as realization set in. This wasn't just a sealed space. It was a secret burial of memory, of connection, of something far more painful. Her family had closed this room not just to hide Samuel, but to erase him. Emily backed out slowly, pulling the door shut behind her. The past had been unlocked, but it had never left. The room lingered in her thoughts like smoke. No matter where Emily went in the house, it followed her. She tried to focus on practical tasks, cleaning old dishes, sorting books, but every detail pulled her back. The drawings, the photographs, the phrase scribbled over and over, "Don't tell." Samuel had existed. And someone had gone to great lengths to remove him from every story. That evening, she returned to the kitchen, diary in hand, and reread the final entries. Her mother's words weren't cold or cruel. They were frightened, trapped. Emily began to understand that Rebecca hadn't just been a daughter caught in tension with her mother. She had been caught between two children and a terrible choice. The next day she drove back into Belhaven. She wasn't interested in cryptic warnings anymore. She needed answers. Clara was at the diner this time, seated near the window, sipping coffee like someone waiting for a storm she knew would come. Emily approached without hesitation. "You knew," she said, "about Samuel." Clara's cup paused mid-air. Her eyes narrowed. "You've been in that room." "I have. And I found photos, diaries, drawings. You all acted like I was digging for nothing, but you knew exactly what was buried here." Clara set the cup down slowly. "Sit." Emily remained standing. Clara sighed. "You think this is simple, but it's not. Try me." Clara looked out the window for a long time before speaking. "Rose had 2 children. Your mother and a boy she adopted when Rebecca was 17. The boy had issues, darkness in him. Some said it was the trauma of his early years. Others thought it was something deeper." Emily's voice was low. "What happened to him?" "No one ever knew for sure," Clara said, "but there was an incident. After you were born, summer of '98, you and Samuel were both here." Emily's stomach turned. "He was 8, Clara continued. "You were 4. And one afternoon you were found alone in the woods, crying. You had bruises, no memory of what happened, just screaming and shadows. Rose told everyone it was a fall. But after that day, Samuel disappeared." Emily's voice cracked. "Disappeared how?" "They said he went to live with a cousin. Some said a special school. Others whispered worse things. But no one saw him again." Emily's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the back of the nearest chair. "My mother wrote about him. She was afraid of what he might do, but she also seemed guilty." Clara nodded. "Rebecca tried to protect you. She fought with Rose, begged her to send Samuel away. But Rose believed in keeping family close no matter the cost. So she locked him away?" "No one ever confirmed it," Clara said softly. "But some think he was kept in that room, not for punishment, for protection, from himself, from you." Emily sat, finally. Her mind reeled, fragments rearranging themselves into a new, terrible image. Why would Rose leave that room untouched? Why leave it locked for all these years? Clara stared at her with a quiet, heavy expression, maybe to remind herself of what she'd done, or maybe because part of her hoped you'd come back one day and remember. Emily couldn't speak. Her throat closed, her hands clenched in her lap. "There's a reason the town keeps quiet," Clara said. "Rose didn't ask for forgiveness. She built walls. Around that room, around all of you." Emily stood slowly, her voice barely audible. "I need to know the truth. All of it." Clara didn't stop her. She only nodded. "Then you'd better speak to Daniel." Emily found Daniel at the edge of town, near the old tool shed behind the mechanic's shop. He was replacing a window pane, sleeves rolled up, hands dusted in sawdust. When he saw her, he paused, wiped his hands on a rag and waited. "I need to talk to you," Emily said. He nodded once. "I figured you'd be coming." She stepped closer, her voice low and steady. "You knew about Samuel. You knew what was behind that door. Daniel looked down, then back up, eyes tired. Not everything. But enough. Then tell me what you do know. He leaned against the shed, folding his arms. I was 18 when Rose adopted him. I helped out around the cottage, back when I still lived with my uncle nearby. At first, Samuel was quiet, skittish, but he clung to Rose like she was the only person in the world he trusted. Emily watched him carefully. What changed? He started acting out. Small things at first. Tantrums, nightmares. He'd get violent sometimes, but never to Rose. She said it was trauma, that he'd seen things in the foster system no kid should. Maybe she was right. And my mother? Rebecca was visiting often then. You were still a baby. And from the moment Samuel saw you, something shifted. He was obsessed with you, drew pictures, left toys at your crib. At first it was sweet until it wasn't. Emily felt her stomach tighten. He didn't know how to control himself, Daniel said. One time, he pushed you down the stairs. You were too young to remember. Rose said it was an accident, but Rebecca didn't believe it. Emily's voice wavered. Was he locked in that room? Daniel hesitated. After the summer of '98, yes. Rebecca gave Rose an ultimatum. Send him away or lose both her and you. But Rose, she couldn't do it. Said he was broken, not evil. Said he needed protection. Emily's eyes filled with something between rage and sorrow. So she locked a child away. He wasn't just a child, Daniel said, voice heavy. He was dangerous. I know how that sounds. But I saw it. One night I found him standing outside your room holding scissors, just staring. She recoiled slightly. That was the night Rose made her choice. She emptied the spare room, reinforced the door, said it would be temporary until he got help. But no one ever came. Emily's breath caught. How long was he in there? Daniel didn't answer right away. I don't know. I stopped working there the following year. Rose told people Samuel had been sent away. She lied to all of us. I thought maybe he was in a hospital or something. But when I asked, she'd shut down completely. She never mentioned him again. Emily turned away, mind spinning. There were drawings, a bed. He lived in that room. For how long? Months? Years? I don't know, Daniel repeated. I swear to you I don't, but I knew from the beginning something was wrong, and I didn't push. That's on me. You were just a teenager. I was old enough to speak up. They stood in silence for a long time. Birds called in the distance. The sound of a hammer echoed faintly from across the road. Emily looked back at him. He was my brother, wasn't he? Daniel's eyes softened. I don't know if it was ever official, but he called you his sister. She nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that truth. Do you think he's still alive? Daniel hesitated again. I honestly don't know. But if you're going to find out, you'll have to go deeper than anyone else ever dared. Emily looked down at her hands. They were shaking. I need to remember, she said quietly. All of it. Emily returned to the cottage as evening fell, the trees casting long skeletal shadows across the porch. The house no longer felt like a home or a relic of someone else's life. It felt like a wound that refused to close. Every creak, every whisper of wind carried a memory just beyond reach. She lit a single lamp in the study and sat with her mother's diary again. This time she read it slowly, not searching for answers but trying to feel the fear, the pressure, the helplessness between the lines. Rebecca had been a woman torn in two, between a child who needed protecting and another who needed saving. That night, Emily didn't try to sleep. Instead, she sat at the top of the stairs outside the locked room. The door was still ajar from her last visit, the air inside thick and unmoving. She stared at it for hours, her breath slow, heart heavy. And then something shifted, not in the room, in her. A flicker of memory, faint, like candlelight behind fog. A voice, a song. She closed her eyes and leaned her head against the wall. Sammy and Emmy, two little stars. The rhyme, a silly lullaby. Someone used to sing it to her, a boy's voice, Her eyes flew open. She ran downstairs and tore through the photo box again, this time with purpose. Buried beneath the stacks was a tiny cassette tape marked in faded ink, July 1997, Picnic. She found Rose's old tape player in the closet and pressed play. Static. Then voices, laughter, her mother's, then Rose's, and then a child. "Come on, Emmy." "Look," her own voice answered. "I don't want to go in there." "You're not scared," the boy teased. A pause, then crying. Hers, a scuffle, a sharp shout from Rose far away. Then silence. She stopped the tape, hands trembling. It was real. He was real. She'd known him, played with him, feared him. Emily stood, light-headed. She climbed the stairs again and entered the room fully this time. She sat on the edge of the small bed and forced herself to look. The books, the toys, the walls, a timeline of Samuel's life, preserved like a shrine no one wanted to desecrate. She ran her hand across the pillow, a lump underneath. She pulled it out, a tiny journal, the pages childish but filled with ink. Her heart thundered as she read the first page. "I miss Mommy. I miss Emmy. I want to be good," she kept reading. "Sometimes I get mad and I don't know why. They said I scared Emmy, but I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to stay." A tear slipped down her cheek. He had loved her, in his own confused, broken way. Further in, the entries darkened. "The room is cold. I don't like the food. I don't know what day it is. I heard them talking. Emmy went home. I want to go too. Don't tell, don't tell, don't tell." She closed the journal, unable to read more. Her breath hitched in her throat. Something inside her cracked. It was no longer just the horror of what had been done. It was the unbearable weight of being loved by someone the world had forgotten, and maybe in the process she'd forgotten too. Emily curled into the bed, as if by lying there she could rewind time, find the child she once was, the brother who once held her hand, and the truth before it shattered. But sleep didn't come, only memory. The following morning, the world outside the cottage looked deceptively calm, dew on the grass, birdsong in the trees. But inside Emily, a storm churned. She hadn't slept. Samuel's journal lay beside her, its final pages unread, as if the weight of what remained was too much to bear all at once. She drove into town again, but this time not to wander, not to search. She went for answers. Clara was opening the store when Emily arrived. The older woman looked up, surprised at first, then cautious. "We need to talk," Emily said. Her voice was steady, her hands weren't. Clara hesitated, then gestured her inside. "Fine, but not here." They sat in the back room, the scent of old paper and cinnamon lingering in the air. Emily placed the journal on the table between them. "I read it," she said, "all of it." Clara didn't touch the book, her lips tightened. "Why did no one ever speak his name?" Emily asked. "Why did my family make me forget him?" Clara sighed, a sound full of years and regrets. "Because remembering him was dangerous." Emily's voice cracked. "He was a child with darkness in him." "No," she said firmly, "a child with trauma, who was isolated, rejected, and locked away like a secret." Clara looked away. "Tell me," Emily demanded, "what really happened that summer? What happened to Samuel?" Clara's shoulders sagged, as if the burden had been waiting to fall for years. "I was there the day it happened," she said. "The day Rose made her choice." Emily didn't interrupt. "Samuel was unstable. I don't know what he'd been through before Rose adopted him, but there were incidents even then, fits of rage, episodes he didn't remember. But Rose insisted he could be healed with love, that he was just misunderstood." Emily swallowed hard. "The summer you turned 4, something changed in him. He became possessive of you, protective in strange ways. Rose thought it was innocent, even sweet. But Rebecca saw it for what it was, a warning sign." Clara finally met her eyes. "One afternoon, you went missing. Rose and I searched the woods for hours. When we found you, your arm was bruised and your clothes torn. You were shaking, mumbling his name. And Samuel..." She paused. Samuel was hiding in the root cellar, crying, saying he didn't mean to scare you, that he just wanted to keep you forever. Emily felt the air thin. They should have gotten him help, Clara said, but Rose panicked. She told everyone he'd been sent to a school, but I knew better. She'd confided in me once, said if she told the truth, Samuel would be taken away forever. She couldn't let that happen. So she locked him in. Clara nodded. It was her penance, her protection, her prison. Emily gripped the table edge. And my mother. Did she know? She suspected, maybe even knew outright. But she never came back after that summer. She cut ties completely from Samuel, from Rose, even from you in a way. Tears filled Emily's eyes. I remember now. Bits and pieces. A voice in the dark. A game that turned to panic. Clara reached across the table but stopped short. You were never meant to carry this weight, but you have a right to know. Emily stood, voice low. I don't want silence anymore, I want truth. Clara looked at her, something like pride softening her face. Then you'll have to find the rest yourself. Rose never told me everything. But she left records. Somewhere. Emily turned to leave. Be careful, Clara added quietly. The past doesn't always stay buried, and digging it up doesn't always bring peace. Emily paused at the door. I'm not looking for peace, she said. I'm looking for him. Emily returned to the cottage with Clara's words still echoing in her mind. Records, somewhere. She tore through drawers, cabinets, boxes she'd ignored before, looking for any trace of what Rose had left behind. What she found was buried beneath loose floorboards in the study. A locked metal box, wrapped in plastic, hidden under a false board beneath the desk. She pried it open with a rusted screwdriver. Inside were documents, medical records, letters, a photograph of Samuel at what looked like 15, gaunt, pale, eyes blank. Attached was a short note in Rose's handwriting. Crescent Hill Institute. Admitted September 2003. Voluntary placement. Her breath caught. He hadn't died in that room. He'd been moved. The institute was located 3 towns over, in a place called Willowgate. She left the next morning, the file tucked tightly in her bag, heart pounding with something close to hope and fear. Willowgate was quiet. A cemetery in the shape of a town. The Crescent Hill facility stood on a hilltop beyond the main street, surrounded by rusted fences and overgrown hedges. It looked more like a forgotten mansion than a hospital. Inside, the receptionist at the desk blinked at her name. Emily Bennett. You're listed as family. I'm looking for Samuel, she said. Samuel Bennett. The woman scanned her computer, then hesitated. I'm sorry. We don't have a current resident by that name. He was admitted in 2003. There must be some record of him. The woman typed again. We did have a patient by that name, but he passed away. 2015. Emily felt the ground tilt beneath her. How? The woman looked up gently. I'm afraid I can't disclose that without administrative approval. You can submit a request through our legal department. I'm not here for forms, Emily snapped. Then she stopped herself, breathed. Please, was he alone when he died? The woman hesitated, then softened. There was no listed next of kin, but there is a file. I can let you read part of it. She returned minutes later with a thin folder. Inside were copies of therapy notes, progress reports, and one final page, a staff summary of Samuel Bennett's final years. Patient remained non-verbal for majority of his stay, responded only to the name Emmy. Frequently drew images of a forest, a locked room, and a girl with yellow shoes. Showed signs of trauma-induced regression, punctuated by short, lucid periods. Recurrent phrase during episodes, I want to go home, I want to see Emmy. Emily's throat closed. She remembered those yellow shoes, a gift from her mother the summer she turned 4. He remembered her. All those years, locked away, institutionalized, fading further from the world, and still he remembered her. In the back of the folder was a note from his therapist. Samuel was not violent in the years before his death. Withdrawn, yes, but gentle, quiet, full of sorrow, not rage. Emily held the page to her chest and wept. She asked to see his room, and though the wing had since been closed, the staff allowed her 5 minutes. It was small, windowless, a narrow bed, a worn sketchbook on the desk, preserved by accident or habit. She opened it. The drawings were the same as the ones in the cottage: swirling spirals, children holding hands, a house beneath a black sun, and on the last page, a girl with yellow shoes and a boy in shadow, reaching for her hand. She closed the book. Samuel had lived, and suffered, and remembered. Now she would not forget him. Emily left Crescent Hill with Samuel's sketchbook clutched to her chest, as if holding it might hold back the sorrow pressing against her ribs. The sky was overcast, but she barely noticed. Inside her, the weight of silence had begun to shift, no longer heavy in denial but carved open by understanding. She stopped at a small cemetery on the edge of Willowgate, guided by a handwritten note left in the back of Samuel's file. It simply read, "Plot 17B, Rose Hill Grounds." The headstone was modest, a flat grey slab, overgrown with grass, half sunk into the earth. The name etched on it was not Samuel Bennett. It read, Samuel Reed. She knelt slowly, tracing the letters. Reed. Daniel. 1,000 pieces fell into place. Daniel had known, not just about Samuel's story, but about Samuel himself. Emily's heart pounded, not in anger, but in sudden, piercing clarity. Samuel had been family, even when no one would claim him, and Daniel had honored that, even in secret. She sat by the grave for a long time, letting the silence surround her. No visitors, no flowers. Just wind-through trees and the soft hum of the earth settling. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I remember the way you laughed. I remember how we used to play with that wooden train set, and how you'd always call me Emmy. I forgot for so long. I think part of me didn't want to remember, because remembering meant feeling this." She placed the sketchbook on the grave. "I'm sorry they treated you like a secret. You weren't a mistake. You were my brother." A breeze passed through, stirring the pages open, landing on the drawing of the yellow shoes. She smiled, tears slipping freely now. "You remembered me all that time. I wish I'd remembered sooner." The drive home was quiet. The road twisted through trees and hills, the same as it had been the day she first arrived, but everything felt different now. The cottage was no longer a mystery. It was a monument. Back inside, she sat at Rose's desk and opened a clean notebook. She didn't know what to do with all the pieces yet, but she knew she had to write them down, not to expose the past, but to honor it. To keep Samuel's story from vanishing, she began with what she knew: his smile, his drawings, his pain, his love. Page after page she wrote until her hand cramped and her eyes blurred. Then she stood and walked through the house one last time, not to search but to see. In the corner of the living room was the old oil lamp. She lit it. Its glow flickered across the walls, catching on the photo above the mantel, Rose, Rebecca, and baby Emily. But now she saw it differently. Behind the smiles, the silence was loud. She understood why now. Upstairs, she returned to the locked room, still open, still frozen in time. She stepped inside and whispered, "I found him." It didn't make anything right, but it made something whole. In the quiet that followed, Emily sat beside the bed and opened the sketchbook one last time. On the inside back cover, in small, shaky handwriting, were words she hadn't noticed before. "I dream of Emmy sometimes. She's not afraid in the dream. She holds my hand and we go outside." She closed the book gently, her heart cracked but no longer cold. Samuel's life had been brief, isolated. Forgotten by most, but not by her, not anymore. The days that followed were quiet, not in absence but in release. Emily no longer paced the halls like a stranger. She moved with purpose, even when her hands trembled. The pain hadn't faded, it never would, but it had shape now, and that made it bearable. She drove back to Rosehill with a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the woods behind the cottage. There was something sacred about picking them herself, as if the land still remembered Samuel too. She laid the flowers on his grave and knelt once more, this time not in sorrow but in solidarity. "I brought these from home," she said softly, from our home. There was no wind this time. Just sun breaking gently through the trees, casting dappled light across the stone. She didn't stay long. There were other goodbyes to make. That afternoon she hiked into the deeper part of the forest, to the clearing she remembered from the photos, from dreams that once terrified her. The trees stood tall and still, their trunks guarding memories buried beneath roots and time. At the base of an old maple she placed 3 letters, one addressed to Rose, one to her mother, and one to Samuel. In Rose's, she didn't write anger, only truth and forgiveness. The choices her grandmother had made were cruel, yes, but born from fear, from desperation. Rose had been a woman shaped by her own scars, and perhaps that didn't excuse her, but it explained her. And Emily needed to let that be enough. In her mother's, she wrote the words she wished had been spoken between them. She acknowledged the silence, the absence, the confusion, and she released the questions that would never be answered. Rebecca had lived with guilt. Emily could feel it now in every brittle page of that diary, but she had also loved her, fiercely, protectively. And that love, even in its imperfection, deserved to be honored. In Samuel's she wrote everything, how she remembered the yellow shoes, how she found the drawings, how she still heard the rhyme, Sammy and Emmy, 2 little stars, echoing in her chest. She folded the letters, weighted them with stones, and left them at the base of the tree. Then she stood for a long time, her face tilted to the sky, eyes closed. It wasn't about letting go. It was about holding on differently. When she returned to the cottage, something felt different. The walls no longer loomed. The shadows no longer whispered. The room at the end of the hallway remained open, but no longer haunted. Emily stepped inside with a quiet certainty. She stripped the bed, washed the sheets, opened the windows wide. She painted the walls in soft, calming tones. She took down the dark drawings and replaced them with her own, illustrations filled with light, with forests and stars and 2 children laughing beneath the sun. She turned the room into a studio, a place to create, to remember, to begin. Daniel visited the next week. He stood in the doorway, silent as his eyes moved across the room. "You gave him his name back," he said. Emily nodded. "I gave him a place." They didn't speak more than that. They didn't need to. Before he left, he handed her a box. Inside was the original wooden train set, the one Samuel had played with all those years ago. He had found it in Rose's cellar, wrapped in cloth, preserved like an heirloom. Emily placed it on the shelf beside the sketchbooks. The house no longer held secrets. It held history and healing. Light now filled the corners that had once seemed impenetrable. Each morning Emily woke with the gentle certainty that the cottage was hers, not just by name, but by belonging. She opened the windows to let in the Vermont air, hung new curtains in pale green, and placed wildflowers on every sill. The house felt lighter, the weight of years replaced by a quiet hope. She spent her days in the room that had once been locked away, now her studio. Paint and pencils scattered across the desk, unfinished sketches of forests and children sprawled on the floor. She'd begun to illustrate a story, not just Samuel's but her own. It wasn't a story about secrets or ghosts. It was about love found in unlikely places, about resilience, about how the past could be faced, forgiven, and even woven into something beautiful. Sometimes Daniel visited, always unannounced. He'd stop in the doorway with a thermos of coffee, and she'd nod in thanks, both of them content in a wordless camaraderie. He started bringing her small gifts, a box of new paintbrushes, a tin of homemade shortbread, an old photograph of Rose and Rebecca in front of the cottage, both laughing, hair wild in the wind. On rainy afternoons, Emily found herself reading aloud in the living room, her voice echoing through the once silent space. She read letters from Rose, her mother's old diary, even Samuel's journal, not to dwell, but to honor. Sometimes she would pause, her eyes filling, but always she would continue, voice steady and sure. Neighbors began to drop by, bringing jars of jam or homemade bread, curious about the changes. The cottage, long regarded as cursed or haunted, slowly became part of the community again. Emily welcomed them, sharing stories, not the full truth, not every scar, but enough to let light in. She made plans to host an art show in the fall. Her first series would be called Unforgotten. Each painting was rooted in memory and hope, in the love she now allowed herself to feel for all those lost to silence. The garden, too, came alive. Emily pulled weeds, planted marigolds, and pruned the rose bushes that had once seemed wild and angry. Daniel helped her build a small bench beneath the biggest maple, the one where she'd left the letters for her family. She liked to sit there at dusk, watching shadows stretch long and golden across the grass. One evening, Daniel lingered longer than usual. They sat together on the porch, watching fireflies blink in the growing dark. He handed her a folded note, his handwriting careful and unsure. "I always wanted to say I was sorry, for not speaking up, for leaving when I should have stayed." Emily read the note twice, then smiled. "We all did what we could, even Rose, even my mother, even Samuel." Daniel looked at her, the last of the sunset reflected in his eyes. "You gave him peace." Emily squeezed his hand. "He gave me a home." They sat in companionable silence, the world soft around them. Inside, the house was quiet, but no longer empty. Later, she returned to her studio, placing the last touches on a watercolor of two children running through a sunlit forest. For the first time, she painted herself and Samuel, not as shadows, but as bright, laughing figures side by side. She signed her name beneath his, Emily Bennett, Samuel Reed. Not a secret, not forgotten. The cottage was no longer just a place of endings. It was where everything, healing, hope, love, began again. Summer edged toward autumn, and the air turned crisp, carrying with it the scent of apples and wood smoke. Emily felt herself settling into the rhythm of the cottage, her grief mellowed into gratitude, her days full but not frantic. She had come to believe that all the secrets had finally surfaced, that there was nothing left for the old house to reveal. But the past, she knew, had a way of lingering. One afternoon, while reorganizing the attic, Emily found a loose board beneath the window. It wobbled when she stepped on it, and curiosity pulled her closer. Carefully she pried it up, expecting nothing more than a mouse nest or a stray marble. Instead, her fingers brushed against a small, sealed wooden box. It was heavier than she expected. Dust and age stained the grain. She brought it downstairs, heart quietly racing, and sat at the kitchen table to open it. Inside were items wrapped in faded handkerchiefs, a silver locket, a pressed sprig of lavender, and at the very bottom, a thick envelope addressed in Rose's familiar handwriting. To Emily, if she ever finds her way home. She opened the envelope, hands shaking. The letter began without preamble, Rose's voice vivid in every word. "Emily, if you are reading this, then you have found the truth I could never say aloud. Forgive me for all I have hidden, from you, from your mother, from myself. I was raised in a world that believed some things should never see the light. I tried to protect you both. In the end, I hurt you both. There is no excusing that. Samuel was not a mistake. He was a gift. Broken, yes, but so was I. I kept him close because I could not bear to lose another child. I see now that my love was a prison, not just for him, but for you all. The silence I built to protect you became a wall you could not climb. Rebecca never forgave me. I do not blame her. If you cannot forgive me either, I understand, but I hope someday you might see my love in the ruins and find something worth saving. You, Emily, are stronger than any secret I ever tried to keep. This home is yours. Let it hold joy, not shame. Let it hold light, not shadow." With more love than you can ever know, Rose Emily read the letter again, tears stinging her eyes but her heart steady. She pressed the locket into her palm, opening it to find two photos. One of Rose as a young woman, one of Samuel as a child, laughing, wild-haired and free. She traced their faces, feeling not sorrow, but connection. A tangled line of love and loss, finally made visible. In that moment, Emily realized there was nothing left to fear. No more rooms to keep locked, no more names to erase. She had inherited not just a house, but a legacy of struggle, of mistakes, of endurance, and of hope. She gathered the letter, the locket, the lavender, and placed them in her studio among her art supplies. Their presence felt like a benediction, a final blessing from the women who had come before her. As dusk crept in, Emily stood at the open window and listened to the wind, feeling both lighter and fuller than ever before. The last secret had been told, and with it, the past at last allowed her to rest. In the soft golden light of early autumn, Emily walked barefoot across the back lawn, the grass cool against her feet. The world felt wide open now, the edges of fear and regret finally blunted by truth and forgiveness. The cottage behind her stood strong, no longer a place of shadows, but a home rebuilt on memory and choice. She wandered to the edge of the woods, pausing beneath the old maple where she'd left her letters. She whispered a silent thanks, unsure if she spoke to the past, to the trees, or to herself. For the first time in years she felt whole, not untouched by sorrow but transformed by it. Inside, her art studio brimmed with new life. Paintings of forests, children, and sunlit rooms filled the walls. In every brushstroke, she found echoes of Samuel's laughter and her own resilience. The story she once feared was now the source of her strength. She planned to publish the children's book she'd started, a tale of two siblings lost and found, their love surviving even the darkest of secrets. Neighbors came more often, bringing stories and laughter. Daniel was a constant presence, sometimes working in the garden, sometimes reading on the porch, always ready with quiet support. Their friendship deepened, grounded in shared understanding, and the silent knowledge that some scars can become bridges instead of barriers. On quiet evenings, Emily walked through every room, feeling the life pulsing in the house. She no longer shied from the upstairs hallway, no longer feared the memories behind each door. She lingered at the window, watching the last rays of sunlight spill across the hills, knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had inherited more than a cottage. She had inherited her story. She understood now that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is choosing to move forward, to make something new from all that has been broken. She let herself laugh, let herself cry, let herself hope. If you have felt even a fragment of Emily's journey, her courage, her pain, her transformation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are so many stories waiting to be told, each one a thread connecting us to something deeper, something true. And if you're ready to keep exploring the mysteries that shape us, click on the video now appearing on your screen. Another tale awaits you, one where secrets still sleep in locked rooms, and love always finds a way through. Emily took a final breath of autumn air, her heart light, her spirit free. The past had found its voice. The future, at last, belonged to her. And so the cottage at the edge of the woods stood not as a monument to sorrow, but as a beacon for all who dare to open locked doors, to face what haunts them, and to find, beyond the darkness, a light of their own.